LibertyNation.com does not endorse candidates, campaigns, or legislation, and this presentation is no endorsement.
This week on the latest front in the war against Clarence Thomas by the movement left. We'll see what the Republican senators had to say about it. And a new case from the Supreme Court could be huge. All that and more right now on this episode of The Uprising.
We are The Uprising.
Welcome back to The Uprising, a podcast of LibertyNation.com. I'm your host, Scott Cosenza. Joining me today is LibertyNation.com senior political analyst, Mr. Timothy Elting-Donner. Tim.
Hello, Scott.
Welcome back to the podcast.
Always good to come back and let her loose, so to speak.
It was and is, not was, we're recording now on the 4th of May. A huge day, a huge week, a huge moment potentially in Supreme Court and federal law in the country. And it's hard to understate this, I think, for people. And I wish it got more play nationally. I mean, I enjoy the opportunity to stand out, Tim, as one of the few who have covered this extensively for the pages of LibertyNation.com, the host, or rather the sponsor of today's podcast. But this is what I'm talking about, Tim, is the Supreme Court, and they didn't issue a ruling this week that was a big deal. What they did was they agreed to take a case, and it's the terms of which they agreed to take it under, and the case that has me excited, all animated, a Twitter. And this concerns what's called the Chevron deference. Now, Chevron is a Supreme Court case where basically they said, hey, listen, if there's ambiguity in a statute, if there's no ambiguity, then you go with the plain meaning of the statute. There's no question. But if there is an ambiguity in a statute, how do you resolve that ambiguity? Now, for limited government advocates like you and I, others, we would say this is what the third branch of government, the judicial branch, is for. They're the umpires. They're supposed to call balls and strikes. So if they read the statute and it says X, they're the ones that are supposed to interpret what X means relative to the application of that law. That's sort of black letter law or understanding of the Judiciary 101 for conservatives and libertarians. But the Chevron case says, no, you defer to the agency's interpretation of the language.
Right.
A rule
That's
or a law.
Default option. Right.
It seems to run at odds to every notion of, we have to be protected from the government. Like the founder's vision of government is that, or understanding of government is that it's going to be, it's likely to encroach on the people's liberties. And so we have to put all manner of protections in there for people so that it doesn't encroach on their liberties. And yet the last thing you would ever do is say, oh, you get to be your own judge for what something is or what it means, right? I mean,
it's always amazing to me when I was growing up to see the number of people that were willing to just give away their own decision-making capacity for the sake of groupthink and security, which isn't really security. I mean, look, I think your article on this, I highly recommend it to people listening and watching because, first of all, it's fairly concise. I mean, it's not a long read, but it well explains an issue which, to your credit, you have been on top of this for a long time. From the early days of this podcast, we've discussed this periodically. And, seems to me this is the kind of thing you get when the Supreme Court really has a seismic shift, as it really did when Amy Coney Barrett went on the court and
well, yes, we're going to talk about Trump's additions to the court and it's changing.
But I mean, they've already overturned Roe versus Wade.
Yeah.
As Exhibit A. So this is a court, it seems to me, as an interested observer, seems more willing to break precedent than any court in my life.
I want to talk a little bit more about that in a bit and why I think that's true. So please remember to bring it back up.
Okay.
Let's just get the basics of Chevron down a little bit more and the importance of if it's overturned. So that deference, and thank you so much for the compliment to my article. It's great when the news pitches a slow one right down the middle to you. You know what I mean? In terms of like having prepared for this. So that helps.
Well, but it's not it wasn't on a tee for, it seems, most journalists.
No.
Don't cover it from this angle. They just look at this as the maneuverings of the court rather than the foundational values that they are, defending.
Yeah. Well, you can imagine that if this is true, or rather not if this is true, that how this works out in reality is that agency interpretation also often, Tim, sides against the citizen, the taxpayer, the regulated party, the corporation, the whatever, and favors the government, favors the executive agency implementing the regulation. And so that's why the Chevron deference is so odious. One of the many reasons why it's so odious to those of us that care about liberty. And limited government. And it's been attacked for, it's a 1984 case, and it's been attacked ever since. But the Supreme Court hasn't ever taken a case that, to overturn it. And Justice Thomas has spoken about it negatively. So, and based on all his other jurisprudence, you hate to say it's a gimme on anything, but I think it's fair to say that, Justice Thomas will be voting to overturn Chevron. Of course, one of the many sticks on the pile as to why they hate him. And we'll be talking about a little bit more about that in a minute as well. But the other thing is Justice Gorsuch wrote an opinion dissenting from the denial of certiorari. So when a case goes to the Supreme Court, it's called an application for certiorari, basically saying, hey, can we please bring this to you for, to argue this case, and hopefully you'll overturn the lower court order or the law or the whatever. And he basically said, okay, I'm going to read you the quote from, this is him, rather than provide individuals with the best understanding of their rights and duties under law, a neutral magistrate can muster. We outsource our interpretive responsibilities. Rather than say what the law is, we tell those who come before us to go ask a bureaucrat.
Yeah.
In this process, we introduce into judicial proceedings a systematic bias towards one of the parties, the government. And so I think he's poised to overturn, and they have at least two colleagues who want to take this case. And so they've taken this case, and the name of the case is Loper Bright Enterprises versus Raimondo. And they're going to hear that case in the fall at their next seating. They're done hearing arguments for the current term. We're waiting on lots of cases, and we'll probably have some to report on the next time we talk. But they took this case precisely to answer the question whether the court should overrule Chevron or at least clarify that statutory silence concerning controversial powers expressly but narrowly granted do not constitute an ambiguity requiring deference to an agency. So I think they're going to toss it out. But even if they just whittle it down a lot, that's a big win for liberty and for corporations and natural human people's right to confront the government with the language that the statute is. Tim?
Well, frankly, it's just as significant, if not more, not the winning side, but the losing side. In other words, the government then is weakened in its ability to force regulations upon the people.
And to force their preferences into the regulations that are passed. That's the other thing too. Right. I think that the pistol brace rule from the ATF represents a perfect, a picture to view this through. You have
don't tell me we're going to get a 5-3-1 opinion.
Well,
5 conservatives, 3 liberals, and John Roberts taking no position. Right.
We'll see. Maybe Justice Thomas will have been removed from the court by then for his
for his egregious sins, which finally are being unmasked by the curious media. This
really is, when I saw this grant of this case grant, Tim, to me, I thought it's if I think, and I don't mean sophisticated in a way that downplays other people's understanding, but I think that if the everyday American had a more sophisticated understanding of
what this
case law and its reverberations and what it means, This to me, Tim, is like a Donald Trump reelection ad times a million. That would be so, because it's like, you mentioned his appointment of
Amy Coney Barrett,
Justice
and two
Barrett.
others, of course.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's not just that. That's the thing. It's not Barrett. It's the others. And he did have the opportunity to do so, which most presidents don't have. So that was true. But also by listening to one of the left's, Darth Vader hated enemies, Leonard Leo, who was at the Federalist Society at the time. I think he might be like emeritus there now or something. But by listening to his picks and picking these limited government justices, we got guns, abortion, now the very regulations and laws of the federal. I mean, it is
This is
it's a sea change.
This is clearly what would you say, a reversal of fortune for the left. But the court itself, right? When is the last time you saw a court so willing to overturn long-standing precedent? I mean, I've never seen anything like this, and they don't seem to care that. I mean, look, the abortion ruling, we heard what, which was a justice who said he was a target of assassination after
Justice Alito, too.
Alito, that's right, yes, and he said the leak, which he says he thinks he knows who did it, but he can't prove it. That leak ultimately didn't matter because it didn't force them to change their minds on a pending, decision that was of earth-shattering importance to both sides, both pro-life and pro-choice, or as I prefer to say, pro-abortion rights and anti.
I won't allow that on this program, Tim.
Yes,
no,
that's right. Not you're taking a stand. Good for you, Scott.
I also won't allow not that I have them on, some radical progressive to say Republicans are all about limiting women's healthcare choices without saying, you mean extinguishing the burgeoning life inside a woman's body after she voluntarily chooses to conceive or act in a way that. Yeah.
One of the things the communists realized was that people they're ruled by language.
Yeah. Destroy the language.
They're ruled by rhetoric, and it started with the People's Republic and everything that has flowed from that essential historic lie.
I want to circle back around and say that, if you don't have a strong majority for a certain opinion in a case that would overturn a landmark or near landmark precedent, I think it's actually appropriate to reserve that ruling. We need some consistency in our judiciary, and we can't have with one, it can't be the case where with each new appointment and retiring justice that we have massive shifts like, oh, now you can't own guns, now you can own guns, now you can't have an abortion, now you can have one. And I'm not suggesting that that's where we're headed. I just think that so I think that there's some reticence there, Tim, an appropriate reticence from by justices for overturning longstanding landmark precedent, and I favor that, just generally speaking.
Well, that may be true, but I think that people who are intellectually honest would admit, whether they're pro-choice or pro-life, that Roe v. Wade was poorly decided.
Oh yeah, this isn't a case.
So
I'm just discussing.
They're
with
also
you're
open
saying
to calling a spade, for lack of a better term, seeing the same iniquities in that ruling that people have pointed at for 50 years.
What I mean to suggest to you is that's why we're seeing more of these landmarks fall now, because they do have the majorities. So that's like, it's not like a bare thing where, it's a one voter. It's a 2 or 3 vote.
Especially when that one vote is John Roberts.
Yeah. Well, that's not something
because
to be relied on.
He is not a precedent shatterer.
No.
Shall we say? That's the kindest thing I could say.
John Roberts did decline to testify before the United States Senate's Judiciary Committee hearing on ethics in the Supreme Court this week, which was
very suspicious, Scott.
yeah.
Suspicious.
This is so funny. It's like, hey, we want to denigrate Justice Thomas. You want to run down here and help us do that?
Help.
Hey, I think maybe I shouldn't do that, But this is where it all started for the latest run of attack on the court. Let's listen to U.S. Senate Majority Leader Schumer.
Inside the walls of this court, the Supreme Court is hearing arguments, as you know, for the first major abortion right cases since Justices Kavanaugh and Justices Gorsuch came to the bench. We know what's at stake. Over the last 3 years, women's reproductive rights have come under attack in a way we haven't seen in modern history. From Louisiana to Missouri to Texas, Republican legislatures are waging a war on women, all women. And they're taking away fundamental rights. I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price.
That was truly one of the most disgusting displays that I've seen in a long time, outside the Supreme Court acting like he's going to incite a mob to overtake the building and burn it down. That's really what was the tone of his voice. And he thinks he can, it was a time where he was trying to prove his left-wing bona fides, right? Post George Floyd, and everybody was radicalized. And so he thought that he could do that without consequence to demonstrate that he's down with a radical left. And more importantly, avoid a primary challenge from someone to his left. That's why he did it, for pure political positioning. And look at the whirlwind that he did indeed.
Yeah. That's where we are now with this move against Thomas. And, Tim, I think there's another component to that too. I don't disagree with you at all about Chuck Schumer moving for his political interests. But the other thing is, I think it really is a backlash against the cases. There is a writ large in much of the left. They're used to winning these right, or at least not losing big. That might be maybe not just winning in terms of getting the whole court, but not losing big at the court. And they're losing massively. The guns thing, I think, is going to come even harder when the sort of reverberations. What happened was with the gun cases, we had these laws getting stricken down, and then now,
we were talking about Justice Alito, and I think the left got a false sense of comfort when Alito, of all people, essentially cast the deciding vote in the gay marriage case, which legalized gay marriage. So the left thought, hey, we've even gotten to him.
Yeah, well, they did a great job corrupting Roberts' jurisprudence in the Obamacare case. So what they thought they'd build on that victory. I think it made sense for them.
They thought they could basically, all they had to do was win over one impressionable justice, and they could just walk right through the door. Yeah. But they never counted. They never counted on Donald Trump getting 3 Supreme Court appointments in 4 years. You think about that. That's unbelievable. That's a third of the court that he overturned in one term.
No, it's a Trump court. And again, it's not just that he got the picks, but what he did with them and who he put in there. And that's who we have.
And that's why I said when we approached the 2020 election, I said, if you're for Trump, that's fine. But realize that he's already made the most permanent impact he could. So if you had a choice between controlling the court for a generation or getting Donald Trump reelected, which would you pick?
I'd go half a generation is 10 years. 10 years to me is enough. I'd take that.
Sure. And that alone could be more like 20 or 30 years.
Well, let's not get
We'll
ahead of
see.
ourselves.
Thomas is
Let's enjoy the Liberty
Yeah, well,
Games.
Thomas is getting up there in age.
Yeah.
But,
Well, let's go ahead and listen to this. I thought was a par for the course for what's happening with these attacks on Justice Thomas. And let's go ahead and listen to Louisiana Senator Kennedy from the hearing this week.
A few months ago, Mr. Payne, you retweeted the following statement. Some justices are politicians in robes who thrive in a system where access and influence are for sale. Some justices are politicians in robes who thrive in a system where access and influence are for sale. Now, that's a pretty bold statement.
I'm sorry, Senator, is that a news article?
No, sir. That's a retweet here. You tweeted this out. Tell me which justices are for sale.
I don't recall that tweet, but
Here it is. November 21, 2022. Can you tell me which justices are for sale?
No.
Are any of them for sale?
No, the problem is that the American public has a perception that some
but
justices
I'm
may
going
be.
to establish the point first. I want to know, you tweeted this out. Do you believe that some justices are for sale? And if so, which ones?
No, Senator, I do not believe that justices are for
Then why'd you
sale.
tweet this out?
What, can you provide more context of what that is?
Sure, I'll get you a copy, but here it is. I
Okay.
checked it and triple checked it. You also said less than a month ago that John Roberts, you retweeted this out. John Roberts is a disgrace.
No, I actually.
Not I disagree with Justice Roberts. Well, you didn't call him Chief Justice Roberts. You called him John Roberts.
No, this is
Or
that's
you retweeted this.
no, Senator, I did not retweet that.
Yes, sir, you did right here.
I will
It's
need
big
to
as
see.
Dallas.
I will. Can you provide a copy to me
Sure.
now? But
Sure.
I did not retweet.
Can you tell me why you think Chief Justice Roberts is a disgrace?
I did not say that. Did not retweet that.
Oh, okay. Maybe Twitter got it wrong.
Someone got it wrong.
Let me ask you this, because the unstated premise of all this, sometimes it's stated, but the unstated premise of all this is that some justices have been bribed. Let's just cut to the chase. Okay?
This is great. I love when they, making them. I think it's one of the rules for radicals for Alinsky is, make them follow their own rules basically, and it's like, put it to them. Where is the corruption here? And one of the things about, this article, Justice Thomas and the Billionaire, I think it's called, from ProPublica, was the recent big hit piece from like it's wave of attack after wave of attack, and that was a big wave coming over the bow of the conservative court. And it's like this guy, Mr. Crow, Harlan Crow is his name, is I think, the billionaire. There's this. It's basically, they say without saying that Justice Thomas is bought by this guy, Harlan Crow.
Right.
And it's like, well, where are the receipts? Where is, I don't, if, you know me long time.
Scott,
I am
let's make it simple. Supreme Court justices should not be permitted to have wealthy friends.
Yeah, right. If you go,
I think that's a perfectly reasonable.
If you spend the day on your friends,
limitation.
if you spend the day on your friend's houseboat on Lake Wall and Paul Pack and eat hamburgers and hot dogs, you're okay. But if your friend owns a super yacht, and it's not even a super yacht, but if your friend owns a really nice yacht, and it's in
Then it's a
a more exotic
purchase.
locale. And the thing that's crazy, Tim, is so that piece doesn't even allege that they're not real friends, which would be a damning indictment, right? It's like, these guys aren't friends. This is a way to give funnel money to,
Say
to
that
Justice
3 times
Thomas,
fast. Yeah.
or something like that. But no, by all accounts, matter of fact, if you read deeper into it, it really seems like this guy Crow is like a Thomas sycophant. And I'm, a third of the way there myself. So I don't say it as an insult. I just mean it as a descriptor. Like, he worships Justice Thomas is sort of. But here's the thing that's crazy. If you're really good friends with somebody as a justice, you can't rule on a case involving their company anyway. In other words, there doesn't have to be the money interest, right? If you and I, if I'm a Supreme Court justice and you and a case involving your company comes up before the court, I can't rule on it whether or not we have a money exchange in our relationship because we're close friends.
Yeah. Look, the smoke is really nothing but vapors.
Yes, but it's expertly crafted vapors in order to create the idea that he's bought and sold. So let me just circle back around to the clip real quick and say that's the point I love about the clip is put it to him. Where are the receipts? Where's the corruption? What I was going to say is you've known me a long time. You know I'm a gun control opponent in every instance. So if you give me a bunch of money and I still continue to oppose gun control, where's the corruption? What you need is the change where I switch and I say, oh, you know what, Tim? Some of these gun laws are actually pretty good. That's where you could say, ha ha.
So I'm waiting for the left to bring forward the case. That's the smoking gun, where Justice Thomas ruled in favor of something that directly benefited the man in question,
or changed.
And here's the answer: he hasn't.
Yeah, no, there's not even a warm gun.
There's not smoking one. Right. I mean, so all the smoke is just vapors from political hacks who are frustrated by the fact that they're going to keep losing at the Supreme Court, and they have this faint hope that they can somehow impeach Justice Thomas, right, and replace him, and have Biden replace him with one of their own, and then boom, they've got their even court back. So,
I am seldom impressed by elected representatives of any stripe, color, or party, but I thought the Republicans acquitted themselves quite well during this hearing of basically saying, with every thing that was brought up about Justice Thomas, like what about this and what about this and what about this, that the left bloc justices have all those things in spades and they never once uttered a peep about it.
Right, exactly. So they have shockingly, leftists have very wealthy friends too. Can you believe it?
Well, not just that. One thing I learned anew this week, the was presented by we're talked about at the hearing, is Ruth Bader Ginsburg, lion of the left, the most celebrated Supreme Court justice on the left by no small margin. They got the ladies have their Ruth Bader Ginsburg tattoos. Tim, even I, no lefty, enjoys the celebration of the Jabot, as you know.
Yes, of course.
And the lifetimes of Justice Ginsburg.
Your signature choice of dress. Yes.
She signed a copy of a case where she wrote the majority that eliminated the Virginia Military Institute's same-sex admission policy. It was an all-male institution, and women wanted to come in, and they said, we're allowed to have an academy for all males because of X, Y, and Z. And Ginsburg wrote the lead opinion. I think it was a 5-4, but it might have been a 5-3-1. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is, she was the author of the majority opinion. And then what she did was she autographed a copy of that opinion and sent it off to the National Organization for Women, a political organization, in order for it to be auctioned off for them to gain money from it. It's hard to imagine, what would happen if Justice Thomas did that with the Bruen case to advance the NRA's fundraising, or if Justice Alito did it for the Susan B. Anthony anti-abortion group to advance their fundraising. But Ginsburg did it. And here's the thing about that. While I wish she hadn't done that, because I don't think it accrues to her, gravitas or independence or whatever that I'd like her to have, I also don't think for a second, Ruth Bader Ginsburg was all about advancing abortion rights in any way possible in America. And I don't think that was a corrupting thing for her. But if you apply it to Justice Thomas, somehow it is, except for it's not. And that's what the Republicans did very well, I think, during the hearing. Let's listen to Senator Graham from South Carolina on this.
Why didn't all hell break loose in 1998? I'm not sure what the reaction was.
Well, when Justice Ginsburg
Yeah.
signed a copy of the VMI decision for the National Organization of Women's Legal Defense Fund. Well, I think we all know the answer to that. Justice Ginsburg, one of the greatest people to serve on the court, received an award from the National Democratic Women's Club. Can you imagine what would happen if Justice Roberts received the award from a Republican women's club? I think we may read more about it. Justice Ginsburg was given a $1 million award by the Berggruen Institute, and it's this annual Philosophy and Culture Award for major achievements in advancing ideas that shape the world. Now, she didn't get the money personally, but they gave her $1 million to give to other people. Does anybody have a problem with that? Does everybody have a problem with that? Well, I'm going to assume silence means yes. The point we're trying to make here, I think, is that this effort to come after Justice Thomas is, I think, organized by the left. I think this moment where we could find common ground is being hijacked. I take Senator Durbin at his word. He's been concerned about this for a very, very long time. But the point is, the game has been played differently, and now we're in a moment where this court is under siege in multiple ways. And that is the problem I think most of us have. What are the lines to be drawn, and who's the referee?
I think that the Republicans really did shove it all back in their faces in a way that actually, just why I'm thinking about it, as I wrote on the pages of LibertyNation.com, Tim, the sponsor of today's podcast, Justice Thomas recused himself from that VMI case because his son was enrolled or an alumnus of
Right.
So the idea that Justice Thomas isn't recusing, like, part of the very charges are that he's not recusing himself. It's like, well, he recuses himself just fine when there's an actual reason to do so. A legitimate.
I just get the sense that this whole thing, Scott, is really.
Start over this sentence. I just get the sense, because you were very hot there. Say it one more time. You're fine now.
Scott, I just get the sense that this is just purely theatrics, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing, to quote the late William Shakespeare. I mean, it's a lot of noise. It's a lot of accusations flying without any evidence. And it's just to try and sort of add a narrative to the left-wing media to cover, right? So, if the New York Times covers it, then all of a sudden you've got NBC, ABC, CBS, MSNBC, and CNN talking about the growing scandal surrounding Justice Thomas, and you create a narrative, and then you try to weaken basically those who are right of center by saying the person that one of the people that most represents their values is really corrupt. I don't think it's going to work, because I think people can see that it's just a naked political attack. I've read a lot of this stuff, Scott, and all of it is, isn't it awful that he went on vacation? And then there was this time they spent together, and I'm like,
where's the there? Where's the part where
culminated with a decision,
where he
put
allowed
billions into the pocket of Justice.
My favorite part about that is how they value the price of the trip as the whole thing. I have been less so since I moved close to you. But before I lived close to you, I would occasionally be the recipient of the gift of hospitality to visit your estates in Northern Virginia and be a guest there. Okay. Now here's the thing.
Which of my estates?
Now here's the thing.
Yeah.
If I were to rent a similar property for a weekend, like, how much would that cost? It would be obscenely expensive. But you can't say that then was the value of that invitation, right? Like, that's so preposterous that if you're the guest of somebody's home or their boat, and you don't control anything about that home or that boat, that somehow there's a value that can be applied to that trip, which is
it seems to me that it's preposterous on its face. I mean,
yeah,
it doesn't even demand a second look, frankly, from what I've seen. And like I said, I've read this stuff. You have a better understanding.
it's cool when
of these
liberals do
things,
it, but boy, when Thomas does it, it's a different thing altogether. Let's close out.
They're just so frustrated, Scott. They're
that's
frustrated.
Yeah, that's it.
Because their sacred cows are being slaughtered.
Well, there's one other component, actually, Tim, which is on that committee, I think there's one person who is in a little bit of a purple state, which is Georgia, but all the rest of them, they assign typically to the Judiciary Committee. They don't assign people that are in competitive races. They only assign people that are able to vote for whatever the party demands. They're the marching people.
Good point.
And so for those folks, it's great for fundraising. They get to then send these letters out to all the pro-life, or rather pro-choice mailing lists and the anti-gun mailing lists, and say, look what I did. I hammered
send out the same YouTube links.
Yeah. Oh, the social media stuff reach? Absolutely. Yeah. So that part, I think, is all a win for them, even though I think in the greater argument, it's a fail. And Republicans did an excellent job making it fail by laying bare those things. They also played this clip, and I'm going to ask you to comment on it for a reason that I don't think you'll suspect. So let's give a listen right here to a previous Senate Judiciary Committee hearing.
Committee will please come to order. Judge, it's a tough day and tough night for you, I know. Let me ask, do you have anything you'd like to say before we begin? I understand that your preference is, which is totally and completely understandable, that we go 1 hour tonight, 30 minutes on each side. Am I correct in that?
That's right.
Do you have anything you'd like to say?
Senator, I would like to start by saying unequivocally, uncategorically, that I deny each and every single allegation against me today that suggested in any way that I had conversations of a sexual nature or about pornographic material with Anita Hill, that I ever attempted to date her, that I ever had any personal sexual interest in her, or that I in any way ever harassed her. A second, and I think more important point, I think that this today is a travesty. I think that it is disgusting. I think that this hearing should never occur in America. This is a case in which this sleaze, this dirt, was searched for by staffers of members of this committee, was then leaked to the media, and this committee and this body validated it and displayed it at prime time over our entire nation. How would any member on this committee, any person in this room, or any person in this country would like sleaze said about him or her in this fashion, or this dirt dredged up, and this gossip and these lies displayed in this manner? How would any person like it? The Supreme Court is not worth it. No job is worth it. I'm not here for that. I'm here for my name, my family, my life, and my integrity. I think something is dreadfully wrong with this country when any person in this free country would be subjected to this. This is not a closed room. There was an FBI investigation. This is not an opportunity to talk about difficult matters privately or in a closed environment. This is a circus. It's a national disgrace. And from my standpoint,
as a black American. As far as I'm concerned, it is a high-tech lynching.
What I want you to comment on, and I thought was just, profoundly interesting when I heard it. And Lisa K. Donner, the editor-in-chief of LibertyNation.com, this program sponsor, wrote a piece this week about competency tests for, or rather, cognition, I think it was, testing for presidential candidates in light of what's going on with Biden. And that, to me, is what's interesting about this clip, is Biden's timing, you can clearly see that all the cylinders are firing. Now, I hate what happens, in terms of the result of those firings, meaning, I'm not a fan still, but boy, the decline from A to B, when we look at him today and listen to him today, how can we think this?
Yeah. Well, I think with Joe Biden, you can see the difference just from when he was in his final years as vice president.
Yeah.
Right. In 2012, that was 11 years ago. I mean, whether you like him or not, he was very sharp in his debate against then VP candidate Jack Kemp.
Mm-hmm.
So the decline is, you do a before and after, and it's
stark.
Stark is the only word.
Yeah. All right, let's go ahead and for those people who stuck with the program, we've got a little. This is going to be a great clip, Tim. There's a clip to end on with. I think that you probably read it most days. I read it to get a handle on what's happening. But there's a very good service in addition to LibertyNation.com's own daily email service. Of course, there's the Politico Playbook, which is a good read for anybody who's interested in what's happening in government and power in Washington. And I was reading it, and I kind of couldn't believe what I was seeing. You'll recall, Tim, that CNN used to have a legal commentator called Jeffrey Toobin on their program.
Yes, I do.
And if you've wondered,
so does everybody else.
If you've wondered what Mr. Toobin has been up to lately, what he's doing is his latest project is to tie current right-wingery in with Timothy McVeigh. Yes, that's right. The Oklahoma City bomber. Homegrown Timothy McVeigh and the Rise of Right-Wing Extremism is the new volume penned by McVeigh. And what the Politico email says is that Homegrown is meant to show that the conventional view of McVeigh as an anti-government lone wolf is wrong. Rather, he was a right-wing extremist who was part of the conservative movement opposing Bill Clinton's federal government, not all government. McVeigh's views, obsession with gun rights, violence, and the founding fathers. I love that tie-in, right?
Obsession with the founding fathers.
Right,
That's
right.
great. That's great.
Have flourished in recent years.
Obsession with democracy.
Right. Have flourished in recent years, as seen most dramatically on January 6th. That's the fast forward to today's politics and where McVeigh and the Republicans all. And it's just so funny so anyway, this is the quote that just was like crazy to me. I found lots of new material to provide a fuller picture of McVeigh, Tim. For example, McVeigh was a dedicated Rush Limbaugh ditto head. That's the Rush Limbaugh ditto head.
God.
But here's the icing on the cake for all of us. It's this interview with Jeffrey Toobin from this week on MSNBC.
Jeffrey Toobin, whose new book, Homegrown, Timothy McVeigh and the Rise of Right-Wing Extremism, is out now and getting excellent reviews. But let's talk now about your exit from CNN and what's going on in your life since then. After, of course, this is the incident that occurred in 2020. Zoom, masturbation, now former colleagues at The New Yorker were involved, among others. Subsequently fired from the magazine. You left CNN. What's life been like for Jeffrey Toobin?
Well, let's talk about the incident itself.
Yeah.
It was a disaster in my life, self-inflicted, self-destructive, and something that I will regret for the rest of my life. I have no excuses. I have only apologies, which I have tried to offer to everyone involved, including very much my family, which was terribly embarrassed by it. But it's now more than 2.5 years ago. And a lot has happened, almost all good since then. And I feel like my life is in a very good place, actually.
And what exactly happened? Was it just you just left open the screen?
I'd rather not go into the grisly details. The only thing I'll say about it is I didn't know other people were on the Zoom call, were watching. I mean, this was not an intentional act on my part. Other than that, I'd rather not go into the details. But I mean, that to me, for that is important to get out there.
Tim, the takeaway, the most important thing is Toobin, not an exhibitionist, but don't king shame him otherwise. He wants to leave it all under wraps, as it were, and just talk about how the modern right wing is basically an evolution from Timothy McVeigh. That's his focus. Focus for today.
From his high moral perch. I'll just say this, that, I was only able to actually listen to him saying that. So I had to sort of fantasize about him pleasuring himself as he was saying that.
I'm going to clip it. Everybody else is going to clip it. Fantasizing about Jeffrey Toobin pleasuring himself. On that note, we'll say goodbye to you and look forward to next week. Thank you.
See ya.
We are the Uprising.
Entertaining, informative, and just plain fun. Watch Liberty Nation's The Conservative 5. Produced by conservatives for conservatives. C5's The Left Free Zone. Hosted by Liberty Nation's Lisa K. Donner. Joined by a raucous, irreverent panel of authors. Deconstructing leftist narratives. Debating the hot topics. And remembering to laugh. Join the official conservative safe space.
You only did that to piss Jeff off.
Liberty Nation's The Conservative 5.
That's it for this edition of The Uprising. Remember to hit Liberty Nation News for original articles, LN Radio, and our signature television program, The Conservative 5. Just go to libertynation.com on your browser or hit Rumble, YouTube, or check out our Liberty Nation News Roku channel. I'm Scott Cosenza. Thanks for joining The Uprising. This program is a production of libertynation.com, where truth is making a comeback.